Hello, welcome to the Comic Book Commentary. I'm Bo Leidig, and it's a brand new month, which means it's time for the next issue of Spawn. So let's zoom in and take a closer look. First published in January of 1993, Spawn number 7 was behind schedule. Had Todd been meeting his deadlines, this book would have come out in November of 1992. However, Todd, just like all of the other creators in the early days of Image, couldn't meet a deadline to save his life. However, the upside being that we did wind up with some great looking art, and specifically this cover, which is one of the more iconic covers from the first year of Spawn. Story, pencils, and inks, Todd McFarlane. Letters and editor, Tom Orzechowski. Story consultant, Terry Fitzgerald. Color, Steve Oliff, Ruben Rude, and Ollie Optics. And also, this book is dedicated to none other than Rob Liefeld, who I had completely forgotten was the co-creator of Overt-Kill, who is listed as Overkill right here, as you can plainly see, which is one of the earliest instances of this book kind of going back and forth on what that character is called. We can see here on the very first page that the story picks up exactly where it left off in issue 6, and while this image does look very similar to the final image in issue number 6 of Spawn being fully strapped, locked, and loaded, ready to go take on Overt-Kill, it is not the exact same image. It's very similar, but not quite the same. I actually put the two side by side to double check, and I'd like to commend Todd McFarlane for taking the time to draw that image a second time, changing things up rather than just reusing the image from a previous book, which would have saved him time. But, you know, Todd's not one to cut corners, which I appreciate. We see here that Spawn is contemplating his plan of action. We're also led to the understanding that despite this being issue number 7, only 3 weeks have actually passed in the timeline from when Spawn was resurrected from the dead to where he is today, which that's a harsh 3 weeks. You know, he went from being dead to being resurrected to fighting a demon to learning that he's basically been betrayed by this archdemon devil guy and he's in this horrible situation, and now he's fighting a mafia cyborg assassin. It's hard being Spawn, apparently. He's obviously got lots of weaponry to try and take on Overt-Kill so that he doesn't have to use any of his powers. However, if any of these guns or all of these guns fail, it's okay because he's also got this knife, and that should be all he needs to take on a 5,000-pound cyborg assassin. We see here on the next page, Spawn is going over the checklist of items that he has grabbed to aid him in his fight against Overt-Kill, making sure he has everything he needs. However, also, you know, stating that he could have just totally annihilated Overt-Kill just by using his powers. However, as we found out, the more he uses his powers, the more quickly he will run out and be damned back to hell in eternal service to the devil. So he is doing everything he can to avoid that. And he is unfortunately interrupted by these young soldiers who were guarding the armory that he's taking all these weapons from. Spawn, of course, has no desire to fight any of them, even though he could easily dispose of them. They're just young soldiers trying to do their job, and they're not involved in this fight whatsoever. So once they break in, he takes a chance on trying something that he's never tried, and that is to teleport, which is a brand new power that we are introduced to in this issue. We do see here then on the next page that Spawn, while he sort of teleports, it's not as if he just disappears and reappears in another spot. It's that all of his molecules break down into a mass and then travel at roughly the speed of light to a predetermined location, namely his home back in the alleyways that he's been living in since he came back as Spawn. However, it's quite taxing on him, and he feels pretty horrible after doing this as he collapses to the ground in a heap and is found by none other than Bobby. This is Bobby's first appearance. While there are quite a few homeless people that Spawn lives amongst in the alleyways, Bobby is one of the very few who gets named and gets real character development throughout the series. Bobby's a little concerned seeing his friend down on the ground like this, all crumpled up. He's in a pretty good mood because he's actually quite drunk at this point. He starts to talk to Spawn, asks him if he's okay. Spawn says that it's fine, he's got to go take care of business. Bobby tells him to just settle down, that he needs to regain his composure, and offers him a drink, but realizes that he can't take a sip of the booze without taking off his mask, which Bobby quickly does for him. Seeing Spawn's face for the first time and getting a chuckle out of it. He's not really disturbed by how horrifically scarred and burnt Spawn is, but, just seems to make light of the fact that, he's ugly, but that's okay. However, Spawn is triggered into a flashback memory by this as we see him quickly scream no and freak out. We also see that his power levels have now dropped to 8,031. And I really do like the fact that Todd never gave us, the readers, a real understanding of exactly how much of Spawn's powers are burned when he uses them for specific things. And doesn't just drop them by round numbers all the time. It's really, it kind of keeps you guessing on how much power Spawn is using every time he does something. Here on the next page, we see an advertisement that Alan Moore will be writing Spawn number 8, and Spawn number 8 will also include a poster insert by Frank Miller, so that'll be really cool for next month's issue. And then we are teleported to another part of the city, presumably downtown Manhattan, in the building of Tony Twist, who is thanking Overt-Kill for dealing with the problem, as the two of them believe that Spawn is dead, and offers Overt-Kill his private jet to fly back to Sicily. However, Overt-Kill wants to get repaired first. He's embarrassed by how much damage he took from his fight with Spawn. And Tony agrees that he can stay here as long as he needs, and that he'll also cover all the costs for any repairs to Overt-Kill's body, and also tries to kind of put out some feelers about who Overt-Kill will be working for after his current mafia boss passes, because Tony is always trying to gain more power for himself, which has earned him the nickname Dracula throughout the crime families of New York City. I'd also like to point out to pay attention right here to the shape and design of Overt-Kill's feet, because there is a pretty big continuity error in the way that they look later in this book. Here on the next page, we see Spawn's horrific visions as his mind travels back, trying to make sense of how he died. And this time he has a vision of the person who kills him. However, the person in his vision is no more than a skeleton, and he cannot see their face or remember who they were. Although he can now vividly remember what that person said to him right before they pulled the trigger, as we see them then blasting Al Simmons directly in the face with a laser pistol of some kind of crazy over-the-top weapon. And then Spawn snaps out of it back in the alleyway where he screams stop, and Bobby tries to console his friend. On the next page, we are then teleported to the home of Terry and Wanda Fitzgerald. Wanda, of course, being Spawn's late wife, as she awakes from a horrible nightmare, screaming, "Don't kill him," where she is now plagued by visions and dreams of someone murdering Al Simmons, who she was told by the government died in the line of duty. In fact, her current husband, Terry Fitzgerald, also is very concerned and lets her know that, yes, Al died in the line of duty, but he would make a point to go to work and get the files needed to find what exactly happened to Al and make sure that everything was on the up and up, just like he had done before. But Wanda says that's not enough. Terry, of course, is actually a CIA agent, so he does have access to some pretty high-level, information and classified documents. And then on the next page, we see this advertisement for Neil Gaiman, who will be writing Spawn number 9, with a poster insert by Jim Lee. That will also be cool to look at. Back in the alleyways, we see that Spawn has now kind of come to his senses and snapped out of his vision as he explains to Bobby what all's been happening to him over the past few weeks, telling him that the mob wanted to kill him and believes that they did, which gives him the upper hand to now go on the offensive. Bobby, however, wonders why Spawn finds it so important to try to take this fight to the mob when they can just move to another set of alleys and live in trash somewhere else. But Spawn says no, that this is their home and that he's not going to let anyone take it from them, and that he's going to protect everyone who lives in the alleyway. Bobby finds this amusing and is surprised that Spawn is some sort of a superhero, despite the fact that he's dressed exactly like a superhero, and in fact claims that he actually thought that Spawn was gay and that was the way the reason he dressed that way. Which I find odd that he would just see someone wearing a cape and chains and spikes and think that he's gay, especially in a world where superheroes exist and he sees people wearing large capes and spandex out and about and on the news. But I guess it was just supposed to be some little joke that Todd threw in there. However, Spawn corrects him and says that he's no hero. Bobby is then a little worried and says, what makes Spawn think that he can go up against the mob? And Spawn says that he has his methods. As he gets up and starts to walk towards the outside of the alleyway to basically get started on his quest to take out Overt-Kill, and he removes his cape for the very first time, stating that it will only get in his way when he fights the cyborg. However, as he and Bobby walk away, they don't notice that the cape itself is actually following the two of them. On the next page, we are teleported inside of the animal shelter that Wanda believes was the employment office of the man who stopped by her home in issue number 3. Of course, we the readers know that that man was in fact Spawn in disguise, and the man here in charge tells her that there's no one fitting that description who works here, and that he's not certain if he would have come from another office. However, that doesn't explain how he knew about Wanda's dog coming from this specific location. Wanda seems unamused by the things that the man is telling her once she realizes that this isn't where the man who came to her home is from. The man even believes that she's staring at his very large ears and makes a joke about Ross Perot, quite poignant for 1993, I suppose. And as Wanda leaves, she wonders if the man who showed up was actually working for the government or another government and was spying on Terry because he works for the CIA, and is left with more questions than answers by her visit to this animal shelter. Here on the next page, we see Spawn is out on the prowl, beating up and intimidating and killing mafiosos, trying to find out exactly who hired the cyborg that came after him, and eventually gets the answers that lead him to the building of Tony Twist. Inside the building, we see Tony sitting behind his desk in an office chair, believing that he is completely insulated and safe from anyone who would do him harm. Unfortunately, he never counted on a Hellspawn coming after him, who decidedly wanted to make a very, very dramatic entrance. Spawn tells Tony to inform his cyborg flunky that he wants to meet him at the Emerson Piers at midnight and that their fight is not over. And then we see the spec sheet for Spawnmobile number 2, which is even better than Spawnmobile number 1, as we will see on the next page. And here we see the Spawnmobile number 2, which has a really cool asymmetrical paint job that they actually thought of a really unique way to display. On one side, you can see it has the shredded cape along the white paint with the Spawn logo in a metallic type of look and motif. And then on the other side, it's all black with fire and then the green Spawn logo. Up the middle, it has a chain that kind of separates the two designs, and it's in an asymmetrical pattern, which I thought was a really cool and unique artistic touch to go with. Most surprisingly, however, with this build is that the car itself is a modified version of a Dodge Omni, or I should say the body is, which is hilarious. If you've never seen a Dodge Omni, take this time to look one up, because I assure you it looks absolutely nothing like what this car looks like outside of the headlights, grille, and tail lights. Here on the next page, we get a rundown of the sponsors for Spawnmobile number 2 and a rundown also of the Spawn Tour 93, in which Todd states he really won't be able to go to every stop that they're going to be making, only really like the large conventions. However, the Spawnmobile will be at every single stop, and if you want to get pictures with the car, you can go to any of the stops on that tour and it will be there for you to do so. The next page we see is an advertisement for Dave Sim, who will be writing Spawn number 10 with a poster insert by Rob Liefeld, which will be cool to look at as well. Here on the next page, we see Spawn standing alone on the docks, presumably at midnight, because right behind him is Overt-Kill, showing up ready to finish their fight. He calls out to Spawn, basically taunting him, letting him know that he messed up and not just crushing his head to make sure that he had died. He says, shall we play? Spawn says gladly. Overt-Kill wastes no time in just smashing the dock that Spawn is standing on, which launches Spawn into the air. He loses one of his guns in the process. And that's when Spawn realizes that despite losing his cape to prevent it from getting in his way, he did not consider that his chains could also cause him problems, as Overt-Kill grabs one of them and yanks him toward him. However, Spawn's quick thinking and reflexes allow him to grab a piece of the dock rubble and shove a giant piece of wooden splinter directly through Overt-Kill's eye. Here on the next page, we see Overt-Kill pull the large splinter out of his eye, not really feeling any pain from it. I'm not sure if Overt-Kill actually has the ability to feel pain anymore, though he does realize that he's been damaged once again, and even says so much as that he's been scarred a second time, and that he can't have that before he unleashes a huge energy burst out of his hand, which I don't think was really ever shown that was one of his abilities prior to this fight. However, Spawn says that if he wants to see scars, to look at this, showing him his face, and tells him to take it all in. Overt-Kill wastes no time in mocking Spawn for his appearance and telling him that he looks like a turd and that he's going to step on him like one. Also, I should point out that we see here Overt-Kill's eye is clearly damaged, leaking some sort of fluid out of it. But in this shot, there is no damage at all. Bit of a continuity error there. But Spawn, despite being taunted by this giant cyborg who's just shot a huge laser cannon burst thing out of his hand at him, not even intimidated a little, as we will see he's quite prepared for what he's about to face. On the next page, we see an advertisement telling us that Frank Miller will write Spawn number 11 with a poster insert by Jeff Darrow, which will also be cool to look at. And then we see this really awesome image that unfortunately requires you to turn the comic vertically to see. And as cool as this image looks, the problem I have with it is that this, I think, would have worked much better as a 2-page splash image and just with more detail. As you can see, there's literally no background whatsoever, but I will excuse the no background given that the image of the two characters is highly detailed. We also see the continuity error that I spoke of earlier in the book, where Overt-Kill's feet and boots are now drawn completely differently and are a different size altogether. And that Spawn's gun is some sort of crazy over-the-top super weapon that can apparently just blast giant plasma holes right through the backs of nigh indestructible cyborgs. And this doesn't bode well for Overt-Kill and his chances of defeating Spawn. Spawn decides not to take any chances and goes full ham, just firing over and over and over again until Overt-Kill is reduced to this dilapidated cybernetic skeleton saying nothing more than malfunction, malfunction. On the next page, we then see Spawn grab Overt-Kill's head, lift it up with a ghoulishly evil smile, and ask Overt-Kill who's laughing now, as he wastes no time in finishing the job, ripping him apart, spreading his pieces all over the dock. It's gruesome, but kind of not as gruesome as it could be, given that it's all cybernetic and there's no real blood or gore, but still, it was pretty over the top, pretty cool scene. On the final page of the story, we see Overt-Kill's destroyed skull on the ground as Spawn sets a charge on the dock to get rid of all the evidence before the authorities show up and detonates a huge explosion, just destroying the entirety of the dock, and then decides that it's time for him to go back to the alleyway and get a good night's rest after doing something that actually gave him comfort despite the over-the-top violence of the actions he's taken this night. It's very reminiscent of his professional life in the world of the living as Al Simmons. Here on the next page, we get image info, which is just giving a rundown of comics that are coming out and when they will be out and when to expect them on newsstands. Just your basic rundown of what's going on with the company at this time. Here on the next two pages, we get the spawning grounds. Most of them are just the standard fare of people talking about what they liked about Spawn and how much they've enjoyed the issues thus far. However, there is one fan who's quite upset with Todd McFarlane in this issue. One Mr. J. Prendergast, who is angry because Todd put a comic book store in Arizona on blast in the spawning ground section of issue number 5 because they had been advertising that he was going to show up and sign autographs at their store. However, Todd never agreed to this. This was something that was probably more prevalent at that time than it is today, mostly because of the internet not being really established in 1992 the way it is now. But basically, a comic book store could just put out advertisements throughout their store saying that some big name artist or writer was going to be there to sign autographs, sell a boatload of books by that writer or artist, and then at the last minute say that the person who they had said was going to be there canceled, and then blame the whole thing on said artist or writer, throwing them under the bus while having made a bunch of money off of really increased book sales. It was really a sleazy business practice, and Todd was not too happy about them doing this with his name. Unfortunately, this Jay Prendergast guy apparently felt that Todd was lying about the whole thing and just trying to put the store that he bought comics from on blast. But Todd does take the high road here and explains, without being, too mean or dismissive of anything that this man said, and tells him that, they didn't have the right to use his name without his permission, and that he had never agreed to ever go there to sign any autographs, and even clearly states in the response to that guy's letter that he is not going to any privately owned comic book store anytime in the near future to sign autographs, and that if you see an advertisement for him to do so, that it is a fake. I commend Todd for taking the high road on this and not, chastising someone who was really kind of, disrespectful in the way that they wrote that letter. And he didn't even have to respond to the guy at all. But it was a good way for him to also explain to all the other readers who might be picking up this book to not get scammed by other people doing the same thing in the future. The next two pages are both full-page splash images. One of Winky. I feel like I remember this character from somewhere or something. I don't know why. I don't remember if this character had a book. I'll probably have to figure that out some other time. And then on the next page, we get this cool Spawn picture from someone by the last name of Phillips. I like that this image was done in what looks to be entirely oil pastels. I could be wrong, but that's really what it seems like. And that was kind of neat. I don't think anyone else had ever sent in an image of Spawn that they had colored with oil pastels before. On the final page of the book, we get an advertisement for the comic book greats, which I have found out almost every volume, if not every volume of this series, is available to watch on YouTube. I don't know if it's necessarily on the up and up or if it was just uploaded by people who had these videos themselves, but I was able to find quite a few of them. In fact, I just recently watched the first volume with Todd McFarlane being interviewed by Stan Lee, and I thought it was really cool. It's a really nice little sit down between two guys in the industry. Stan does a really good job of getting Todd to really fully explain like his process and the way that he approaches drawing. And it's really cool to hear Todd go through all these things and also give examples of it as he has a large piece of paper that he's drawing on to show what he means in his descriptions. And after hearing him explain his process and, you know, really walking you through the way he approaches his illustrations, you can actually see when you read titles like Spawn or when you were looking at his run on Spider-Man, exactly what he was talking about. And, you know, you can see that it's not just him, you know, blowing smoke. These are all things he was doing, and you really kind of gain an appreciation for how much he thought about the way that he needed to do his page layouts and the idea of how to use angles to take scenes that wouldn't be very interesting otherwise and make them visually interesting so you're not bored reading the book. It was a really, really cool interview to watch. I highly recommend that if you have the chance or the desire to watch any of these videos, that you do so. I was able to find them on YouTube by searching the comic book greats, and that brought up, as far as I could tell, just about everything in the series. And then on the inside of the reverse cover, we get an advertisement for Comics for Collectors, which was just a mail-away service that was like, I suppose, any other mail-away service at this point in time, where you could just send off to try and get your hands on books that you were looking for. You know, it makes you really appreciate the age that we live in today and how easy it is to find this kind of stuff on the internet without having to do, you know, this kind of phone calls and writing letters and really having to work to track down the issues that you were missing in your collection. And that was Spawn issue number 7. As I said before, super iconic cover, really great story. I thought it did a really good job of concluding Overt-Kill's first appearance and his and Spawn's battle, kind of showing that, you know, Spawn's not just relying entirely on his powers, but also his wit and, you know, approaching problems from different angles in terms of the solution to said problems. It was a really great book, super fun read. I really enjoyed front to back, you know, great artwork, great story. No real complaints with this one. Like I said, there's a few little continuity errors here and there, but that's just fun to point out and, you know, poke at a little bit to just kind of be like, nah, it's not entirely perfect. But at any rate, those are just my opinions. Your opinions may differ. Please feel free to comment, like, subscribe, and thanks for stopping by. Have a great day.